Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Husqvarna Viking, keeping the world sewing for over 140 years. Hi, and welcome to Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community. I'm Mary Kate Karr-Petras, and I'm here today with Quilt Makers Content Director Carolyn Beam, who will look familiar to some of our viewers. Welcome to the Quilters Newsletter set. We're very happy to have you today.
Thank you.
And you're here today to talk to us about English paper piecing, right? This is not a technique that we've ever talked about, but we realized it's gotten so popular. It has this new crowd of fans, and so we really wanted to talk about it. And you were the perfect person to have come demonstrate it for us.
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, let's just talk about exactly what English paper piecing is. And you'll notice on the back, I have paper cut in different shapes, and here's another one with triangles. And the fabric is just basted to the paper. The pieces are then sewn together, and they form a shape. Traditional English paper piecing usually uses just a hexagon, and the hexagons are sewn together. But I find for myself that I like the variety. I get bored with just one shape.
Yeah, it's a lot of just sewing hexagons.
Yes. So I like to have the variety. And all of the pieces that I work with form the same shape of hexagon, the same size. So they can be interlocked or sewn together in different ways.
And you're showing us a way of doing it by hand, the traditional method. There are ways of doing it by machine, but we're here today to talk about handwork.
Just by hand.
Okay, great.
Right.
Great.
Okay, so the first thing we need to do is baste the paper to the fabric. And I'm going to show some triangles like this one here. So I've got a few already cut out. And what I like to do when I'm basting is use a Sew-Line glue pen. This is a special fabric glue pen.
So you're not hand basting with thread?
You can.
You can, but this is one nod to, modern tools available to us.
Right. And this is really easy, real convenient. So you just basically what I like to do is just put a little dab of glue onto the shape itself, onto the back of the fabric, and then I'll run the glue along one edge of the triangle. Oops, slipped a little bit. And then fold the fabric up to meet the paper. Now, one thing that's really important when you're basting is always turn your shape and baste in the same direction. So I'm turning my shape clockwise, and I'll always baste in that direction. So again, the second side, just baste and fold the fabric over. And you're going to have tails, and those are perfectly fine. Rotate, and I'll baste the third side. And again, these tails are perfectly normal.
Now, when you cut out your shapes, did you lay the paper on the shape and then cut around it, sort of eyeball your seam allowance?
Yes,
okay.
I just eyeball.
And what are you going for, kind of a 1/4 inch?
Just basically trying for a 1/4 inch. If you're a little bit more or less, that's really not going to matter. Okay, so there's one triangle. Let's just do one more so I can show you how these will all fit together. Again, just lightly baste the paper to the fabric. Glue one side, fold it over. And this glue is not a real sticky, it's going to last forever glue. So if it does come off, the basting comes undone, you can easily just reglue the shapes back into place.
Water soluble? Okay. I mean, it's by design, not supposed to be permanent or...
Right, it's designed for fabric. And we'll just get the third side here.
And your fabric shape, that's just copier paper?
That's what I use.
Yeah, it works well enough for you. It holds up.
There are plastic shapes you can buy. I find it's just easy to use. Use the paper. You can print it right off your printer.
Right. We have it in abundance.
Right. Okay, so as I mentioned, everything is basted going one direction. Now when you take your shapes, like these two would be sewn together, the reason you want it baste going in one direction is now these will nest nicely together. And you won't have tips that are trying to fight with each other.
And do you trim the tips?
Nope.
You don't? Okay.
Nope, those will all be taken care of when you finish the project.
As opposed to, say, like a half-square triangle unit or something where you're constantly trimming dog ears. We don't want to do that here.
Nope. And you'll notice on some of these pieces I still have tips. And those will all be covered up when when you finish the project.
They just
So
live there, happily hidden
Yes.
away.
Yes.
Okay.
So I would basically go ahead and finish basting all 6 of these, and they'd be arranged like this and sewn together. So let's talk about sewing them together.
Sure.
I like to use a 50 weight thread. I use the Aurifil. It's strong, it's thin, and you don't see the stitches. And what I find, I have used a little bit thicker thread, and we'll just look at this example here. And not very noticeable, but you can see some of the threads that I've sewn. And I mean, I'm going to live with it.
Right, right.
But you want a thread that's thinner. Like I said, I like this one. You can also use a silk thread, and that works well too. So the first thing you're doing, I've got 2 pieces already sewn together here, and I'm going to add the third one. But the first thing you do, and I've taken these 2 here, fold them right sides together like this, and I stitched across this line. So I wanted to go ahead and have those 2 sewn so I could show how to sew this third piece on. And you notice there is a little V shape here. So what we'll do is sew the first line here, and then I'll show how to fold and sew the second line. So I typically will start my thread somewhere back along here, and I'll just travel underneath the fabric to the corners. And I've sewn just a little bit up to the point so far. This side is already sewn. So now what I can do is, they're matched up, but you can, with the paper inside, you can just manipulate the paper and it bends very easily and line up these other 2 sides that I have to sew. Now the stitch that you use, you're coming from the back towards yourself.
Okay.
And you want to just grab the very tip of the fabric. Try not to get the paper. So you're grabbing just the very tip. And you want the needle to come straight back, straight forward. You're not going to come in at an angle. It's going to go from the back straight through to the front. And then go again to the back and come toward the front. And I like to take my stitches, maybe 1/8 of an inch apart at the most. And you'll just continue like this, coming from the back straight through to the front.
Now, what kind of a needle do you like to use?
Just an applique, a sharp.
Okay.
That's the most comfortable for me. It's thin and sharp, so it will glide easily through the fabric.
Right, it's not going to take a big bite
Right.
out of that little tiny edge there.
Yes. After I sew a few stitches, I'll go ahead and give the thread a little yank just to kind of embed it into the fabric. And then you can see that with this thinner thread, you can't even see the stitches. And this is just a neutral thread that I'm using. I'm not trying to match the colors because I've got so many different colors here. It'd be really hard to match.
It would stand out somewhere.
So I'll just go ahead and finish to the end. And then again, what I like to do is just travel with the needle, come up somewhere underneath the seam allowance, and then tie my knot.
Okay, and do you do that at the end of every line? Okay. And can we talk about joining rows? Like, do you join them in smaller sections like this, or do you join rows together at a time and then go kind of up and down and up and down?
Well, it depends on the project I'm making. And with these hexagons, I really don't have a plan yet in place.
Okay.
But there's a couple different ways you can join these. Now this particular shape here, these 3 hexagons, will make a shape like this, a larger hexagon. So there's a couple things you can do with them. You can either use this particular shape as it is to make something like a mug rug or a candle mat, or you can join them into a larger piece. So let's look at how these can be joined. So one thing you could do, the triangles like I basted here, those fit nicely between hexagons. So you could just arrange them. And what I would do if I was putting multiples together, I would have all the triangles be the same fabric, just for some consistency. And that would be me. You wouldn't have to, but you can join these like this. They also fit together just side by side.
Kind of that classic hexagon look that we're used to.
So all of these would basically make like a hexagon sampler. You're trying different fabrics, different techniques, ending up with the same basic shape, just for variety. Like I said, I don't like to work with one single shape. I like to have the variety in the fabrics, the colors, and all the pieces that fit together.
It's a little bit more work, but the effect is really striking.
It's fun, and one thing that I found is I can cut most of these shapes from charm squares, from 5-inch squares of fabric. So that's why you'll notice there's a lot of variety in each of mine, because I can only cut a certain number of shapes from each charm square. So for this particular shape here, I could only get 2 of these trapezoids. So I needed 6, so that's why I've got 3 different fabrics. But they all work together, and it creates a fun sampler.
And when you have, it would seem like you're paying attention to grain line when you're placing your shapes on your fabric before you cut them. In the first place with handwork, it's not going to stretch and pull quite as much, and you have the paper in there anyway. But do you really think about grain line?
Only because I was working with charm squares, so it was easy to line up one of my long edges along the outside, which I'm assuming is the straight of grain.
One would hope.
Yeah. Yeah, so in that case, yes, a little bit. The triangles, obviously, you're going to get 2 sides that aren't on the straight.
Sure.
But for the most part, it seems to work out that way. So let's just look really quickly at how you could finish these. As you notice when you look at these, there is no 1/4-inch seam allowance.
Right.
So you can't bind these as you typically would a regular quilt. And you'll notice I still have the paper inside. The time to take out the paper is when you have sewn all around a particular shape. So I could take the paper out of the triangle because I've sewn all the way around. If I was using this particular shape as my finished product, like as a mug rug or something like that, then I could go ahead and take the outside off. But typically you just leave the paper in until you've sewn around all the shapes. Okay, so let's look at this one here. This one, just to show as an example of how you'd finish it, because you don't have that 1/4-inch like you would normally have in a regular quilt. And when you quilt it, just some simple quilting lines, and again, I've got the paper in here, which I wouldn't have if I was quilting. But you cut the batting, even with the edge of the hexagon, and these are all finished edges here on the hexagon. You don't want to quilt any closer than a 1/4-inch from the edge, because you have to work with that 1/4-inch when you're finishing it off. So you'd cut your batting the same size, even with the finished edge, and then cut your backing a 1/4-inch larger. And all you do then is tuck the 1/4-inch of the backing underneath, and you finish with just a whip stitch along the edges. And if you've got any little tails, like in this one that are hanging out, you just tuck those under as you go when you're sewing to finish off your project. Very simple.
Yeah,
it's a great portable project.
Definitely. A lot of people like to take them places these days, it seems. It's just a nice portable, as you said, and sitting in front of the television or
in the car,
what have you, in the
sports games.
I'd be afraid in the car, just pricking my finger, but that's just me. But people do it.
I know people do. You can get a little, little sewing board to sew on, and you
True.
can baste in the car. You could try sewing if it wasn't too bumpy.
Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you so much for coming today and showing us these designs. There's also a handout that we're making available that people can download to get these templates, correct?
All these different shapes, and it shows a little finished, like I was showing, just to sew multiples together, separated by triangles. That's on the front, and all the different templates to make all of these different hexagons are all included.
Very good. Yeah, and they're full-size templates, so you can just print them out, print up as many as you want. Just go to our website and follow the prompts, and you will be able to find this download. Thank you so much. Thank you again for coming and showing us this today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Bye-bye. Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Husqvarna Viking, keeping the world sewing for over 140 years.